Our focus today is very much on the advent of a rising series of new cases across the American South. Nevertheless, there are 16 states with rising cases and rising percentages.
As you can see, we are facing a serious problem in certain areas. What we're dealing with right now is community spread in the context of a substantial proportion of the people who are getting infected do not know they're infected.
Well, the coronavirus cases across the country, across the world, have spiked. There you see the U.S. cases at 2.45 million, U.S. deaths at 124,000. There are different parts of the country that are seeing this increase, particularly in the South, and hospitalizations are going up, which is a stat people are looking at closely. Let's bring in our panel. Matthew Continetti, founding editor of the Washington Free Beacon, Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist, and Bill McGurn, columnist for the Wall Street Journal. You know, Matthew, I just know so many people that are so tired and wondering when the end is. I mean, we're still in what's called the first wave, and they look towards the fall. We're not even through, the summer here. It's really something to watch.
No, Brett, and coronavirus has kind of become the backdrop for our national nervous breakdown that seems to be happening across the country. And I think it has to do with the failure to suppress the virus when we initiated these lockdowns back in the spring. And that's really a failure of all levels of government. And so I think it's good that the coronavirus task force was back out there today. And I think the White House needs to continue to demonstrate leadership. Even though each area is different and it all comes down to individual behavior, these are messages that need to be broadcast every day.
Texas and Florida seeing an increase. Leaders there, take a listen.
Look, what the governor did today was to take the right pause on certain areas that we think are creating this spike. We're seeing an increase in hospitalizations as it responds to those out there who've tested positive.
Where we are. I mean, I'm not taking, I didn't say we're going to go on to the next phase. We've done a step-by-step approach. You are seeing infection, the positivity rate grow, which obviously we want to turn that in the other direction.
So, Leslie, I mean, it's becoming an issue that a lot of these places just can't get their heads around based on what they started with.
The problem here, Brett, is it's kind of simple what we need to do when we look at other countries. New Zealand had 0 cases until 2 Americans went there and brought, sadly, COVID with them. In the EU, we were on par with the EU and parts of the EU, but they're ahead of us now and we're going backwards. And one of the reasons for that is, honestly, a lack of personal responsibility as the medical professionals I'm talking to. I talked to today infectious disease specialist at Johns Hopkins University on my radio show, and they said it's simple. Social distance, wear the masks. We are the problem. And that is the problem. States opening too early and people not taking it seriously, congregating in groups, not wearing masks. We have a huge control over this, and we have a responsibility societally to do that because we're really putting a burden, as we see in these states, the ICU, on the healthcare system and the healthcare workers, and we don't want that going forward. Like you said, rightly so, Brett, we can't even talk about coronavirus coming back. We haven't got through this coronavirus, and we're already headed into July.
Right. Bill?
Yeah, look, the numbers are troubling coming up, but one of the things that comes out is the disconnect between the deaths and the hospitalizations and the new infections. And that's good news. It suggests that it's lesser lethality than we thought before. Look, what I think is that there's a lot of people that don't want states to open up. I don't think the American people are interested in who's to blame, who did this, who did that. There was a lot we didn't know at the beginning. But it's really kind of rich for, say, Governor Cuomo to point a finger at Governor DeSantis. Look at the death rate, the comparison, the total deaths in New York and Florida. And Florida has a much older and more vulnerable population. So I'm not sure the American people like that sort of blame game. And there's an implicit message out there, people rooting for some states to fail.
And that's, obviously in this environment, we're also in an election, Matthew, and that came up today at the coronavirus task force briefing. The CBS reporter Paula Reed asking the vice president about campaigning. Take a listen.
does sound, though, like you're saying do as we say, not as we do. You're telling people to listen to local officials, but in Tulsa you defied local health officials to have an event that, even though you say it didn't result in a spike, dozens of Secret Service agents, dozens of campaign staffers are now quarantined after positive tests. So how can you say that the campaign is not part of the problem that Dr. Fauci laid out?
I want to remind you again that the freedom of speech and the right to peaceably assemble is enshrined in the Constitution of the United States. And even in a health crisis, the American people don't forfeit our constitutional rights.
So, Matthew, we're getting ready to head into convention season, and it really is the tale of two conventions, much different looks.
It is. But, you know, Brett, I think a lot of the critics of Trump-style campaigning and holding the convention lost credibility when they didn't raise those same questions that Paul Reed asked during the Black Lives Matter protests and during the huge gatherings in public spaces that we've experienced over the civil unrest of the past few weeks. So it's unfortunately now we've become such a fractured nation that we have these two narratives going. No one really trusts anyone, and public health is in danger.
They really have no agenda other than the idea we're going to topple a statue because what? It's not going to close the wealth gap. It's not going to give a kid whose parents can't afford a college money to go to college. It's not going to close the labor gap. In my opinion, Black people laugh at white people who do this.
Bob Johnson, founder of BET, talking about bringing statues down there. This as the president signed an executive order earlier tonight, tweeting out, I just had the privilege of signing a very strong executive order protecting American monuments, memorials, and statues and combating recent criminal violence. Long prison terms for these lawless acts against our great country. We'll start there with the lightning round. Bill, thoughts?
Yeah, look, what we're seeing is total surrender to the mob. And I think in a way, worse than the people that are doing this, tearing these things down, are the people that stand by silently. They know better, and they're afraid to speak up. It's pathetic to try to reason with the mob, you know, to say, hey, Ulysses S. Grant was a good guy on the good side, fought the slaveholders, or Lincoln helped free the slaves. They're not interested in that. They're just interested in destruction. I think it won't stop. Look, the future can't be where we have federal marshals surrounding our monuments for 24/7 with chain link fences. At some point, we have to reach some kind of accommodation. But I think we need to see people arrested and jailed. That will send the message this isn't tolerated. It looks like great fun to these people.
Leslie?
Yeah, with overcrowding mandatory minimums and releasing people because of COVID-19. Come on, Bill, that's not a good idea. Look, we need to preserve our history. We need to preserve our heritage. We have textbooks. We have museums to do that. If a Confederate statue is offensive to someone, do I like them tearing it down? No, we don't need the violence. There is a way to go about doing that in a peaceful manner. And it is wrong to pull down statues of abolitionists, of Grant, of suffragette individuals. But for those people out there, people of color specifically, that are offended by these statues for the Confederacy, should we be building statues to honor a very terrible and dark time in our history when we can preserve the history without building and putting these individuals on a pedestal? So I don't agree with the president's executive order. And in stark contrast, when JFK had marshals protect somebody, it was Mr. Meredith when he was the first black man to walk into the University of Mississippi as a student.
Okay, we'll see if this comes up and how far it goes in the politics of where this stands. We do want to get down the road to this place called Candid Casino, and this is the VP choice because that's the next thing pending for Joe Biden. Matthew, your VP choice, you have $100 in chips.
Well, Brett, I'm putting 50 on Kamala Harris. I'm putting 30 on Elizabeth Warren, and 20, my sleeper candidate, Congresswoman Val Demings.
Okay, Bill.
I have 40 on Keisha Lance Bottoms, mayor of Atlanta. I have $40 on Val Demings, and I have $20 on Stacey Abrams, probably for similar reasons for Matt. I think he has to pick an African-American woman at this point.
All right, Leslie.
Very similar to the guys. I have $50 on Senator Kamala Harris. I have $30 on Congresswoman Val Demings, but I have $20 on Congresswoman Karen Bass, who is also the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus.
Okay, bets are closed. Finally, winners and losers. Leslie, winner and loser.
I like to do loser first. Politicians and people out there who don't want to wear masks, who don't want to social distance, because this has led to spikes, and not just in my, but in healthcare's opinion as well. Winner, I'm gonna give a shout out to 3 Republicans, Representatives Fitzpatrick, Hurd, and Upton, who crossed over party lines and voted with Democrats on the sweeping police reform bill in the House.
Bill, wrap it up. Winner and loser.
Clear winner, Sidney Powell, who got her client a tremendous judgment that no one thought was possible when she took over the case. The clear loser this week is Abe Lincoln. If you can't even respect the great emancipator, there's not a hope for the rest of us.
All right, panel, thank you very much. Make it a great weekend. Thank you.